Welcome into UGA Football Live with JC Shelton, where the dogs come to talk. All right, guys, welcome in UGA Football Live with JC Shelton. I'm here for Georgia Tech, clean old-fashioned hate, joined by none other than former Georgia tight end, my partner this season, Arthur Lynch. He's a barber. He's a former dog. Well, he is a bulldog. You're always a dog. Artie, how you doing, my man?
I'm good. Had a little Friendsgiving last night here in Boston. We do a little tradition. We don't cook. We go to the steakhouse every year, and I'm uncomfortably full already. We're not even at the big turkey day yet, so yeah, we're gonna see how tomorrow goes. But all in all, we're doing well. Excited to talk some dogs with you.
Yeah, I love that. And honestly, on that note, because if you missed our live show last night talking CFP rankings, it's a really good national show if you want to get beyond just Georgia. You can find it there on the Pulse Sports Network in the live tab. But Artie said something, and we didn't have time to expand on it. And it's Thanksgiving was his favorite holiday. And I thought I was the only one, Artie, that I love Thanksgiving. Now, it gets disrespected because of how close Christmas is, and people like getting gifts, man. Let's just all be honest, okay?
Oh, no doubt.
The food is not as good on Christmas. Now, depending on where you're at, you have some good stuff, but it's not as good. It's not the full spread. You know what I mean? And yeah, it's just the gifts that add into it, and then baby Jesus, of course. But I think Thanksgiving gets very disrespected. I love it. My future parents-in-laws, they're just ordering Cracker Barrel and just hanging at the house themselves. And I'm like, we're doing a whole spread, family in. I'm going to fast. All right. I'm going to work out fasted.
I'm currently fasting right now.
Oh, yeah. I'm not eating. I am not eating. And then it's all at once. Blood sugar goes through the roof, and then kick off football and food. I mean, that's it for me. I mean, that's glory days right there.
Yeah, man. I've always taken this approach. Christmas was always, obviously, right. Christmas, you accept gifts. Like you said, there's a religious component to it. Whether if you're Jewish, the leading up to Hanukkah, Christmas, obviously, baby J-Man's birthday, Three Kings, the whole nine yards. But Thanksgiving to me was always something unique. In Massachusetts, for over 100 years, they do high school Thanksgiving Day football. So it would always start out 10 a.m. The kickoff would start for these. Usually, it's typically like your biggest rival you play on Thanksgiving. So not all that different than college, right? And but you hit the nail on the head, right? Like Thanksgiving to me is the best holiday for three things, right? Football, food, and family. And just the concept of Thanksgiving, like we're giving thanks, grateful, right? Thankful to be together, thankful for all these different things. So I've always taken a different approach of why it's my favorite holiday. But it just, you think about like who doesn't love their family? That's probably a loaded question, but who doesn't love football? Who doesn't love food? So I'm very excited for tomorrow. I'm thankful for you, my guy JC. Obviously, your career in the media has brought us together. Just me being a Georgia football guy and a guy that likes to talk, and you're a guy that obviously is good at what he does. Has built a career up being in media. But I would like to think that this little what turned out just to be a few spots here there on podcasts is I consider you a friend, so I'm thankful for you. And kind of with that, man, I'm ready to kind of dive into some Georgia football, but definitely I think we both wanted to highlight what Thanksgiving is to us and why it's special.
Yeah, that's very sweet, Artie. I appreciate that. I consider you a
Of
friend
course.
as well, my brother. And it's really cool because I've met some of my best friends doing this, really great people. And it's something I love to do. So it just, it only brings it higher, right? Only makes it better.
100%.
So I love it. All right, let's jump into it. Now, my first note for Tennessee, and guys, we'll briefly touch on Tennessee here. Not a lot to break down, to be honest. We all know what kind of happened there, but just our thoughts. But my first note is Dolly Parton, mid, question mark. The Rocky Top song. Now, listen, it was in a very loud stadium. I don't know if you caught it, Artie, or her trying to sing it. I don't think it was a performance I was looking forward to it. Now, I hate the song, but Dolly Parton, a legend.
Look, man, it's a dangerous business taking shots at kings, and in this case, queens. So I'm gonna reserve my comments because she's pretty universally beloved. It's kind of like taking a shot at like a Taylor Swift or Beyonce. It's like, you better be ready to know what's coming.
Yeah.
The rabid fan base, let's just say that.
Yeah, Taylor Swift. Listen, Taylor Swift's great, but then I was pumped with Taylor Swift watching football on Sundays, and then I just kind of got tired of her, to be honest. But that's just me. Uh, anyway, so that happened. Peyton Manning on the field. Oh, it was great to be a volunteer that day until what, the second play of the game, I guess, because the first play of the
Yeah,
game, obviously 75-yard touchdown there by Jalen Wright. Kid's got the juice, man. He's got some wheels on him. I think the funniest thing too is after that game, and Kirby Smart was asked about that play, and he said he told Glenn Schumann, our code DC, before the game that we should just go ahead and let them score. They're going to score first. We should just get it over with. And I thought that was pretty telling. I mean, it's funny, it's comical when you look back at it. The first play touchdown that you beat the team by 28 points in the end. But my question is, will that ever end up biting the dogs? Um, my first thought would be no, because of the offense that Georgia has. Um, but it's just interesting, right? Because it's very weird for a Kirby Smart defense, one and one and two, just nationally, one of the top ranked defenses giving up a first drive touchdown so many times this year.
yeah. Look, and you and I had an offline conversation about why I think, like, what makes Kirby a great head coach and what constitutes like being a great head coach in college. And I think if you look at, this year, and like historically speaking, like they typically give up a first score in some way, shape, or form. Doesn't have to be a touchdown, but could be a field goal. And look, scripted offense is like when you're a offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator in the SEC level, like football IQ wise, you are the level of football knowledge that you have is elite, right? Now, whether or not you can draw up those plays and create schemes in game and kind of play chess versus checkers, that's what makes you an elite coordinator. But in terms of just like knowledge of football, all of these coordinators have a ton, right? So when you are scripting that kind of first 8 to 10 plays from an offensive perspective, you're basing those scripts or those plays about what you're going to get based off the film that you've watched on these base defenses, right? What does Georgia give you when we line up in two tights or four wide receivers or an I or 21 personnel, 22 personnel, 13 personnel, so on and so forth. And I think with Kirby is like Kirby has built his entire program off developing players, recruiting at an elite level, and building a culture around competition. And I think he is an unbelievable defensive coordinator, but he also is like, if you ever hear about guys who teams who play against Bill Belichick, it's not that the schemes, it feels like you're seeing ghosts out there as Sam Darnold once said. It's just like the schemes are relatively not super nuanced, but like they coach their guys up to do their job at an elite level, right? That idea of like do your job. And I think what Kirby does is like, hey, I'm going to develop my guys. I'm going to create and foster this environment of competition. They're going to be tough. They're going to know how to tackle. They're going to know their assignments. But I just think, when you're scheming something up in the first 10 plays, yeah, I think sometimes you're going to let up some points, right? But I think what Georgia does an elite job at is making those adjustments, right? Understanding like, okay, well, this is what Tennessee's going to give us. We're going to zag a little bit, and then we're going to trust our guys to make the plays. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's going to bite him in the ass or rear end, I should say, right? I think ultimately Georgia, I don't think they give anything away in those first like 10 plays, right? Those first series. And I think that's why sometimes, particularly this year, teams have been able to move the ball. But the true testament of what makes a coordinator great, right, is do they adapt, right? They take what the defense gives them, or in this case, the offense gives them. They communicate with the players in the field. What are you seeing, right? Is this tight end split? Are these guards and tackles splits a little bit tighter this week, or are they wider? If they're wider, that means that they think they can run zone schemes a little bit more than they probably thought they could the previous week. And I think ultimately that comes down to, hey, players being aware, understanding what's going on, and then communicating those little things with the coaches, and the coaches kind of speaking in the headsets, right? As the game's going on during TV timeouts. Okay, here's what we got. Here's what we're looking for. And then when you see those little huddles on the sideline, right, whether it be the offensive line or the defensive line or the quarterbacks, those position coaches or GAs are communicating with the guys upstairs, be like, okay, here's what we got. Here's what we were planning for. Here's what we're getting now. Here's how we're going to adjust. And I think Georgia does a great job at adjusting, but I don't think, to bring the conversation back, right, I don't think we're talking about like a systemic problem that they're letting points up early. I just think they're like, hey, let's see what they're going to give us, right? Mm-hmm. How are they going to attack us? And then let's make the adjustments to the backside.
Yeah, I mean, that's perfect answer. I think the adjustments are key, right? And I think another reason I said no is just because the offense we have. If you consider, let's talk from a Ohio State or Michigan standpoint, and we got a big game this weekend, so I think it's a perfect example. But one of those defenses give up an early touchdown like that regularly, that could bite them because of that offense they have. Can you come 100%. Back? Can you play from behind? But it kind of leads into my next point here, which was really crazy when you consider it. Tennessee never ran that same play again, ever, in that entire game. Which that's incredibly dumb to me. Like, I know they were still set. They were up 7-3 too. They got the ball back up 4, and you still didn't run the anyway.
That's an interesting point, JC. Though, like, because I don't know if it's like teams are like scared of Georgia at this point, but it's like, go home with the girl that brought you to dance, right? Like, or guy that brought you to dance, whatever they're saying. And it's like you first play the game, you're running for 80 yards and a touchdown. It's like, hey, maybe we can go toe to toe with these guys in the trenches. Whether or not you can, you obviously did for one play, but for them to kind of, I'm with you. And it's not the first time that teams have kind of gone away from stuff that's worked. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know if it's a psyche thing or what, but I'm with you. I thought that was weird.
Yeah. Well, maybe they didn't get the look they wanted or something like that. Maybe I'm sure they have a reason, but that was from Pro Football Focus too, guys. I'm not going to act like I'm sitting here as a coach. I'm not watching film. But yeah, interesting to think about. Milton, he played like we thought he would. And no hate to him. Injuries at receiver and other things play into that, but just as a passer and Georgia's secondary being so tough, it was just a bad matchup, and you really saw that throughout the game. And then on the other side, Beck was throwing ropes, man. The speed he was putting on that ball, it was different, right? He has that zip all season, but that was different. And I saw multiple people that know more football than I did saying the same thing about the way he was getting rid of the ball early, on time, in tight windows. And it really allowed Georgia to keep moving the ball and really step on their throats early.
Really it's interesting you bring that up, and obviously you've become close with Aaron as well. And I'm sure you guys have a lot of conversations about football offline as well, online. But a couple of years ago when JT Daniels first got there, and I think Beck was like a freshman, it was that COVID summer, I believe, and Aaron. It's obviously been in the media for a while, and I was like, hey, and we were both kind of friendly with Stetson at the time, and I was like, and Stetson, we had spoke to him earlier in the year, and Stetson was like, I'm going to be the starting quarterback here. I mean, he said that like early on, which was pretty cool. He called a shot, but I remember calling Aaron, I'm like, hey, like, I'm with a bunch of like buddies from us in college. They're all asking about this kid, JT Daniels, like, who looks good, who looks bad, quarterback. And he said, this was back then, he was like, the quarterback with the most potential as a pure passer is Carson Beck. He was like, I don't know if he's got the head for it yet. I mean, he's a freshman. Like, I think he was a freshman at the time. But Aaron, first off, that was like an unfiltered take. But I thought that was a very interesting thing way back then for Aaron to just be like, no, that dude's he can sling it. Yeah. And I just thought it was an interesting point. And sure enough, it's come to fruition a couple years later.
Yeah, and that's what we're learning too, because Aaron's, he hasn't been in it long as far as analyst goes professionally, but his quarterback takes are more often right than wrong.
Oh,
And
totally.
so yeah, that just gives you an example of why that is. But yeah, so offensive domination again, it's kind of the same story for Georgia, 27 first downs to 13 for Tennessee. Biggest really discrepancy here between the two is Georgia was 9 of 13 on third,
Hmm.
perfect in the red zone. Tennessee was 2 of 11, which is impressive for, Georgia's what top 5 in the country in third down defense and number 1 on offense, and that's going to win you games, man. 472 total yards to 277, so that's 202 yards after the first play that Georgia allowed. um Time of possession huge too when you're looking at these 40 almost 41 minutes of possession for Georgia. You have that, there's just, I mean, in your offense, does well in the red zone on third down, you're going to win. I mean, you're going to win by a lot, and they did here. And it was surprising me too, because we saw Tennessee played maybe their most disciplined game of the season. 0 turnovers. They had 3 penalties, and we talked about penalties last week. They're like 130th in the country and and being penalized at home in their own stadium. So they did a good job of that, and they still got beat by 28. Defensively, if Tennessee could have stretched the field, with that passing game that we talked that wasn't there, would have been a different game. I mean, they went 17 and 30. Milton did for 147. That's 4.9 yard average, just like some Patriot stuff right now. Already what we're
Yeah.
seeing for the Patriots.
It's Mac Jones, Zach Wilson numbers right there,
Yeah,
coach.
exactly. Poor Zach Wilson down to third on the depth chart now. Aaron Rodgers with the comeback in about a month. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah, good luck
Um,
with that.
I do want to shout out Michael Williams here. The stats didn't jump out for him. He did have a sack, a pass breakup there, but he was in the backfield all day, just creating
All
havoc.
day.
And that's what the really, even like Trayvon Walker, who went number 1 overall. The people outside of Georgia during that time, they looked at Trayvon Walker and were like, why is he projected as number 1 overall? Why is he projected as a top 10 pick? Before that, it's because he wreaks havoc.
Hmm.
He really takes up blockers and wreaks havoc. And the stats, at least especially for Georgia and even Alabama, sometimes those players don't get the stats, right? Because they're in a unit that works so well together. They open up areas for each other and stuff like that. You're not going to get the numbers, but Michael had a great game, and you probably wouldn't know that unless you watched him specifically. And then Tyke Smith, really impressive, 10 tackles. That man is an all SEC cornerback. He is. I mean, I know he plays star, and those cornerbacks don't get as much attention nationally, but he's doing what Javon Bullard did last year, and he was all SEC. So, you look at Kamari Lassiter, Malachi Starks, they're going to take really the attention. But I think Tyke Smith deserves a lot of credit this year for what he's done, and it's good for him as a senior. Really put in great tape this season with the NFL draft coming up. CJ Allen, 4 tackles, pass breakup, true freshman. I mean, Georgia's not missing a beat without number 10 on the field, which is impressive because number 10 was a big, big part of that year last year, not only from play on the field, but also, a leader, the leadership role, calling the plays and such. And CJ Allen has stepped in well. And Kamari Lassiter, aforementioned, but absolutely locked down. I mean, several times, Milton threw a couple good deep balls, but Kamari was right there. You know what I mean? I mean, one was a drop, I know, but Kamari was a big part of that reason why.
Hmm.
Really impressed with him, and I'm really excited and looking ahead a little bit, Artie, to the SEC championship with him and Jermaine Burton, because for
Hmm.
Alabama, Jermaine Burton is that deep threat. They're the number one. He's the number 1 receiver, former Georgia Bulldog, and Kamari and him going at it. I'm wondering if I don't think Georgia does the whole. We haven't seen much of that man on man following around the field, at least in this Kirby Smart era. But I'm wondering how much he's going to line up on him. I would think a lot, because beyond Kamari Lassiter, you do have that inexperience. Not this year they've had a lot of playing time, but as far as total, and especially against a big time receiver, and Dalen Everett and Julian Humphrey, who's still injured. So I'm wondering what Kamari will do and how they will play that with him and Jermaine Burton. Um, Takeaways, already you can give me yours. Just domination. Georgia's playing the best ball of the season. This is when you want to get hot, and we've talked about this year. You want to get hot now. It's kind of like baseball, hot at the right time. That really plays into football too. It's not spoken about as much, but playing hot is what Georgia's doing right now. You got a poised QB, weapons everywhere. Weapons are healthier. We did have Lad McConkey, Ra Thomas. I'll get to that in a minute, but offensive line healthiest they've been, and then the defense is flying around without a key starter. And that's my takeaways from this one. What do you think, Artie?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is really Carson Beck. And I know we've talked about him a little bit already, but I just think, and again, this has been a theme of this show now, or podcast, I should say, for this season, right? And what I mean by that is early on, people there are some skeptics, right, offensively about the offensive coordinator, about the offensive line, but really, like anything else, like if you want to have a chance to be a great football team at any level now of high school, college football, like the level of importance and emphasis that is placed on the quarterback position is more significant now than it ever has been in the history of the sport. That's just a fact, right? And I think Carson, to Aaron's point, right, that I echoed and spilled the beans on a little bit from a couple of years ago that he made is I think he always was confident in his skill set, but early on was hesitant about, hey, can I be, the guy?
Mm-hmm.
And not to say that he knew he couldn't deep down, but you got to go out and prove it. And I think each week he's gotten better, better, better. And I think probably about midseason he hit that stride. And what I saw on Saturday against Tennessee, I was like, oh, this guy is like, he's starting to feel himself a little bit, right? He's not outwardly showing it. He's not cocky. He's not braggadocious, but you could just tell how he's moving. Like he did a little, like it was about a 6-yard Y stick to Brock.
Brock,
And it was a
yeah.
hell of a catch by Brock. Like if you
Yeah.
just watch it fast, it looked like routine.
Ooh, I
But
was
I was
quick, man.
like, dude, my face mask would have been broken if that was me at tight
Mm-hmm.
end, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it would boom right there, and that told me two things. A, Beck's like, all right, NFL scouts, like, my name's getting thrown out there. Here's what I can do, and that thing was on the money, on target, timing
Yeah.
throw. And also those NFL scouts probably looked at Brock Bowers and was like, okay, we already knew this guy was a stud, but those hands are freaking quick, man.
Yeah.
And so I saw that throw looked very routine. If you're just watching on a big screen, you're having a beer or eating a sandwich, like, but if they slow it down and you're watching, you're like, oh, like this guy's feeling himself. He's throwing some juice on these throws a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I just thought the way he conducted himself, it is not. I don't care if Tennessee's 0-10 or 10-0. That is a tough place to play. It's a lot like Auburn, right? And he went in there, cool, calm, collective, very, 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 very confident. And I was like, okay, like if you're not sure about this guy now, like I don't, you're just a hater, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying he's going to go be perfect for the rest of the season, but I am very confident in where he's at as a quarterback and his development at this point. And if you're looking around, like if you look at the body language of the rest of the team, right, they're now believing in him as much as they believe in a guy like Brock Bowers. And to
Yeah.
have both those guys back playing well, would love to have Lad back full steam. He's been banged up all year. He probably won't get healthy at this point, fully healthy for the rest of the season. That's just the nature of the beast, right?
Yep.
And I think you got to feel real good if you're a Georgia fan, which we are, about our quarterback and really the offensive unit as a whole. I mean, defense, that's kind of more that's more your talk. I mean, I've always been pretty speechless with Kirby's ability to just redeploy new guys to fill the void of first, second, third round picks or 4-year
Yeah.
starters. And that comes down to our original conversation at the beginning of the show is Kirby's just built a program built on toughness, discipline, do your job, competition, and let's recruit and then develop, keyword, on the back end of that, the best talent that's out there. And so I'm never worried about the defense. Offense, I think we got to feel very, very comfortable with where we're at.
Yeah. No, offensively, I have no worries because, and you said there, Carson Beck and his growth. And, covering it all off season, he was named starter early, and then going into the season, I expected growing pains. And here we are. Those growing pains have came and left.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think last week you really saw, your quarterback analyst coming out being like, hey, Carson Beck he's not only playing well, he's playing with the best in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, that out to Brock, I remember that play specifically because I was sitting there, and as a former, at least high school tight end, I was like, that scared me. I was like, how
Oh yeah,
fast and how Brock had no time to even think about it. He just threw his hands up, and it stuck him. It was just very impressive.
stuck
And
him.
that's the type of throws you have to make at the next level. You know that better than anyone. Um, and I think he's showing such a good job of not only, better ball placement than we saw in the first part of the season, but also, taking a little riskier throws. That was a risky throw. That was layered
Totally.
in. He had guys all around him and still stuck him for that first down. But injury updates, let's get into that really quick. So Dumas Johnson, still nothing specific on him. Kirby's holding that close to the chest, hopeful to get back. I think he tries to play with that fractured forearm. I know he told Chip Towers of the AJC that as soon as he got hurt, really after the game versus, when was that, Ole Miss? Um, so something to keep your eye out on. But Lad McConkey, he did play limited snaps, doing an ankle suffered versus Ole Miss. Questionable for Georgia Tech. I don't think it's as bad as other ankle injuries we've had this year, simply for the fact because he did play at Tennessee. And there was one play where Carson rolled out to the right and Lad McConkey really beat his guy one-on-one, had him turned around, pants down, everything. Carson just had to make the throw on the other side. But I think he's healthy enough to really play if he needs to this week. But who knows if they just try to sit him. I'm not sure. Maybe play him early. So expect him to be a little limited. Ra Thomas, foot injury, caused him to exit last week after one catch. X-rays are negative there, but he is questionable. Tate Ratledge, bone bruise on his knee. That was scary. That was scary. He's our best guard, one of the best guards in the country. And he goes down grabbing that knee. I was worried that was some structural damage, but his X-rays were negative. He's day to day. Julian Humphrey still dealing with that shoulder. Not sure when he's going to be coming back. Kirby Smart hasn't gave any updates lately. So he's doubtful. And Warren Brinson didn't travel to Tennessee with a calf strain. He's questionable, but I think they got him back at practice this week. And full injury report, always up on Friday at UGA Wire, USA Today Sports. Let's get into Georgia Tech here more. Dude, a lot of familiar faces too. And I think it's I can't think of a time where there's much former Bulldogs, former Tech guys on both sides as now. I mean, you have Brent Key, former Tech, Buster Faulkner, former Georgia assistant. He's the OC over there. Georgia coaches, obviously, most they just 4 of 10 offensive on field, or not offensive, but on field assistants are former Bulldogs, so they know this rivalry better than anybody. That's a large part of why this practice week for them is so intense. And I've heard players all week talk about that and how intense it is, and how really hateful they put it in. Because you know this, your boy Mike Bobo, and of course Kirby Smart, Will Muschamp, those guys, they know exactly when Tech used to win this matchup more times than not. And then they're trying to instill that into their players because they don't want to play down in this, just because Georgia Tech sits at 6-5 off a 5-7 season. Right. So I think that's a big part of this and why Georgia might play up in this game. And plus it's a 7:30 kick, not a noon like it's been the last 12 years or something crazy. And then on Georgia Tech, you got two former Georgia players. You got Dominic Blaylock, the receiver. You got Brett Scyther, the tight end. So it is interesting from that standpoint. I think that these guys are going to have no problem playing really, really up in this game and having the adrenaline pumping. By the numbers, Georgia minus 24 here. Totals at 60. And Tech has 2 ranked wins this season in Miami and UNC, at the time, at least, as heavy underdogs. Offensively, they're pretty stout. 31 points a game. Georgia's at 40 points per game allowed. Georgia Tech 30.5. UGA 15.1 allowed there. Total offense, Georgia 501 a game. Georgia Tech 435. So the offense can move. Third down, Georgia first in the country at 56.9. Georgia Tech 25th at 45.4. It's not bad again. Third down defense, Georgia allowing 27.3%. of third down conversions. Georgia Tech allowing 42.5. Red zone, Georgia 93.5% of the time they score. Georgia Tech 82. Georgia Tech has not faced a top 15 scoring defense this season. So balance is not what you see from the Tech, right? You have that defense who's given up a lot, but that offense can really make some strides during the game. They do a good job of adjusting as well late in the games. They play really good late in games. That's why they were able to upset Miami and North Carolina. If you let Tech stick around, I mean, they have the offense to do it. Haynes King there, the quarterback, sophomore, Texas guy, went to Texas A&M, transferred to Tech. He's played really well. He played really well last year against Georgia, and especially in the first half. Tech was one of the only teams. I think Missouri was the other that led Georgia at halftime last year, 10-7, right? So Brett Key's going to get these guys playing up. He does. He leads the ACC in 26 touchdowns, right? But has the most interceptions as well. And he's like 17 interceptions, something like that. So look at that and consider how Georgia is tied 14th in interceptions with 12. You got a over under on a prop bet there. Interceptions for Haynes King. I might take that. Also athletic as a ball carrier. Second on the team in rushing, 624 yards, 7 touchdowns. It's got a long of 71. So Buddy can scoot. So I think this is honestly, Artie, this might be a good game for Georgia to have before they play a guy like Milroe. You know what I mean? Who's going to take off and has the speed to do it. So that honestly, I'm really interested now, and we should key on how Georgia defends the QB run in this game. I think Georgia Tech would love to do that, right? Because it takes the defender away from you. Big play opportunity, gets the defense moving, and then you can play action off of that and such. Sophomore, as far as running back here, sophomore Jamal Haynes, 850 yards, 7 touchdowns, got a 6.0 average. Singleton Jr. and Rutherford are guys to watch at receiver. There's really 1 and 2 for them combined. 84 catches, over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, and that's combined. Like I said, Kyle Kennard, best on the defensive line, really probably their best defensive player. 6 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, a pick on the season. So that's kind of by the numbers and players to watch there and trends I'm seeing there, at least from how to differentiate these teams moving into this matchup. Artie Lynch, tell us about playing Georgia Tech, man, and your experience there. I think people would love to hear that as a former dog and what you see in this rivalry.
Yeah, and I'll hit this a little bit later when we do a little history class. And it's not too far in history, but the older I get, the more it becomes history. Look, I think there's something so unique about this game because I don't, particularly how lopsided the rivalry has been for really like 20 years, right? I know Kirby's been very good. I think he's undefeated against Tech. Mark Richt also very good against Tech. I think he only lost like 2 or 3 times in his 15 years, right? So it for people of our generation, my generation, your generation, and even the generation a little older than me, it's like it has been a one-sided rivalry, right? Georgia has been winning and winning pretty big for a long time. But when you're inside it, right? When you're a Georgia player or you're a Tech player, like we don't look down on Tech in any way. We just look at them as like we hate them for what they are. And if we lose to them, it will ruin our entire year. The only time I've been associated with a loss was during my redshirt year. And so like I was on the team, but I didn't play. So I didn't really get like I understood what it meant because I saw the guys around me and I was like, oh, this looks different than like the 4 games I played in which we won. But just good old clean fashion hate, man. Like and even for the older guys, we had a Joe Tarazinski, who was a Georgia letterman and video guy and strength coach. He used to always have a saying, he goes, Georgia Tech does not deserve to have Georgia in its name, right? He called them the bumblebees. He's a typical old school guy. But I mean, when you really break it down on a micro level and you start looking at like the relationships that you know, different guys that were my teammates had with guys on the Georgia Tech team, right? These are 90, probably 5% of the players that are playing in this game, whether they be scholarship guys or they be walk-ons or Georgia guys. You know what I mean? And that's a lot of dudes. That's 270 guys. I think it's 230 or 135 a pop. So we got 270 young men, 18 to 22 years old, that a lot of whom played Pop Warner against each other, right? They played high school ball against each other. They might be related to each other. And then now, in this case, with the transfer portal, we're seeing that, like, heck, a lot of these guys played college ball with each other as teammates.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that just adds to the emotional aspect of the game. And similar to all these rivalries that we see, right? Florida, Florida State. We'll see the Texas A&M come back next year. But these like in-state, like almost like crosstown rivals, right? Um, it's more about bragging rights than anything else because a lot of these games are out of conference. And I think to me, that is the coolest thing about sports and rivalries in sports is your entire season can change if you're having a good year or if you're having a bad year with a win against that kind of crosstown rival, right? And I just think it's very, very, very hard to accurately describe what this game means. And there's so much to it, right? There's obviously the Governor's Cup. If you're a senior and you win, you get a trophy that says your senior year you beat Georgia Tech, and the Governor's Cup comes home for a year, right? And that may not seem like it matters much in the world of the NIL and how big college football is, but I can tell you right now, all of my teammates, myself included, have their trophy in a safe place, and they look at it. They're like, "Well, if nothing else matters about my senior year, right? The last game that we played in the regular season of that year was a win against Georgia Tech." And as you get older, which I'm now getting older, I look back and I'm like, damn, I'm glad I got that trophy because what a bad feeling it would have been if we didn't come back in
Mm-hmm.
Bobby Dodd Stadium with Todd Gurley went off in double overtime, right? That would have stung. So I don't know. I think it means a lot more than people realize. I think fans today for Georgia are very spoiled by how much winning they have done against that crosstown rival. But I know for these coaches and for these players and for the folks that are working inside the administration, both for Georgia Tech and for Georgia, this game means the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it, man. And you look back to the time that Georgia Tech wins at Sanford, they tear up the hedges and stuff. And there's that iconic picture of
Ben
I believe it,
Jones,
yeah, Ben Jones with the little yellow green turf in his mouth from winning at Tech.
2009. Yep.
Yes, sir. So this play it means a lot to the players, and you just heard it there from Artie. And I've seen the same trend this week. I don't think it's any less than you experienced. And that's what Kirby Smart and that staff and having those guys who've been in this rivalry, that's what is beautiful about it if you're a Georgia fan. And if you're a Tech fan, I mean, you have that as well. You have Brent Key there as a former Georgia Tech player.
I
Now
mean, you
let's
think about it, right? Before we move on, you made a great point. Kirby Smart puts an emphasis on this. Kirby Smart, UGA Letterman. Mike Bobo, UGA Letterman. Um, uh, Coach BMAC, Brian McClendon, UGA Letterman, right? That's like I think I'm missing one more too. Oh, Will Muschamp, UGA Letterman,
mm-hmm.
right? Those are four big time college coaches, three of whom were head coaches. And BMAC, probably, if he wants to be,
He
will
was an
be a head
interim.
coach one day.
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
an interim at once. I don't know if that counts, but
Those are real deals, right? They understand what this rivalry means, right?
yeah.
And that's the thing. That's why Kirby places such an emphasis on it. But go ahead. Sorry.
No, we'll get into predictions, and I'm gonna throw it to you. Give your prediction, and we'll get jumping in history class.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so I guess you consider the season as a whole, and even go back to last year. Really, every team does this, but playing down here and there, out of conference, especially maybe a rival who hasn't been up to snuff, like the Dogs have, for example, compared to Georgia Tech. But for the reasons I think we talked about just now, I think Georgia's going to play up in this game. It's also, I heard the players this week talk about how excited they were to play at night in this game. Now, do they like it as much as the 3:30 kick? Maybe not. but having this game at night in Atlanta, other than having it at noon at either stadium, I think is a really cool part of this matchup here this week that we get to see. And I think the players like that, and for those reasons, I like Georgia to play well and not take a step back. Even with Alabama coming up, they haven't spoke about it. According to, I think Malachi Starks talked about this week on the Players Lounge. If you haven't checked that out, guys, please do. It's a free sign up, and it's a cheap premium subscription just to get this stuff that I'm telling you about. But Malachi Starks said, they haven't even talked about Alabama whatsoever. So this is all on Georgia Tech. I like Georgia to play really well. Defensively, Georgia Tech's not going to have what it takes to stop them. Now, offensively, I think they can make some plays here and there, and they played well on offense last year. They didn't have the players whatsoever. They had Brent Key stepping in, and they played well. And I think they're going to score some points in this game. I like Georgia 45-20. I think Georgia covers. I think the over hits at 60. But I think Georgia scores a good many more points than old Tennessee did last week, to be honest. Artie, you share your prediction, my man, and then we'll get into history class with Artie Lynch.
Yeah, man, I'm in agreement with you. I do like Brent Key. I think if you look at his coaching career, I think he's been smart. He's been calculated with the jobs that he's taken. And I think he's been waiting for the right opportunity. He's a Georgia Tech alum. Was at Alabama as an O-line coach under George O'Leary, who, he's had some hiccups in his career, but for the most part, George O'Leary was a really good football coach. So I think Brent Key is actually going to be the right man for that job, right? And I think it is a really good job to have. I mean, it's tough to be in the shadow of University of Georgia, but they kind of always have been, right? Not always, but for the most part, 80% of the time, their history they have been. And I think because of the talent, because of his ties there, and I think, frankly, because of the way he's coached thus far, they're going in the right direction, and there's linear progression for that program. With that being said, a long way to go. And I think he's done a really good job of putting the patchwork team together to make them bowl eligible, which they already are, right? And he's going to have his guys ready to play. It's going to be a night game. I imagine it's going to be mostly red in that stadium, Bobby Dodd, but it's going to be sold out. It is, right? And I just think they're going to come ready to play. Tough defense. And I think it will probably be close for like a quarter and a half. And then, like we have seen Georgia do, they're going to turn that faucet on, and it's going to be power washing for the rest of the day. You know what I mean? And I think they're going to clean them up pretty good. And so I like the over too. Don't be surprised if Tech gets a few points here or there, maybe a garbage touchdown at the end of the game. But I think we're talking about like a 40-20, 41-20 game, like you said. And I'll take the over. You said the over was 60 points, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the spread is like 26 though, right?
No, I said 24 right now. I moved from 23.
24.
So if you go
Okay.
41-20, you won't be covering. I'm barely covering, but 45.
So. Yeah. Well, let's say give Georgia Tech the benefit of the doubt for the program going in the right direction. They're not going to cover, but I think it's a 22-point game, probably 42-20.
Okay. I like it, man. I like it. And I'll get into history class with Artie Lynch. If you're first time listening, Artie gives us a little background into college football history. And it could be from the first year of college football or yesterday. He just gives us some into because we love college football. We love the pageantry about it, and history is a large part of that. And as a former historian, Artie Lynch has what it takes. He has a degree, folks.
Well, historian is definitely a generous term. I studied history at UGA, great history department. Shout out Professor Stephen Mim, my guy. Just that he's still there. Dr. Mim, if you're a history major or you want a history elective, take one of his classes. He's the man. Anyway, back to regular scheduled programming. Saw something online, and I actually was thinking about this game the other day early in the week because I saw a snapshot from this game, and I saw a skinny old Tavares King running down the field blocking, and it was the last time that UGA played a 7:30 kickoff in Bobby Dodd. And I think the last time that this game, just in general, was a night game. And the backstory of the 2009 Georgia Tech game is we had a average season, right? I think we ended up 8-5. We went into that game, I think 6-5, if I remember correctly, because we beat Texas A&M in the bowl game to go 8-5. And the year before, which most Georgia fans will know is a really disappointing year because of how much talent that we had on that 2008 team. AJ Green, Muhammad Masco, I believe, was still there. Matt Stafford was there. No Sean Moran. We were stacked, no doubt about it. And we were preseason ranked number one. Daniel Elbury was on defense, right? We had dudes everywhere. 2007 season finished number two in the country, number one, preseason number one. We ended up winning 10 games and beating Michigan State in the Outback Bowl or Capital One Bowl. But, for as much talent as we had, a lot of people thought that was going to be the year that we won a national championship. It was not. The next year, that season, if people remember, there was a rainy game. I think it was like a 40-37. It may have been Paul Johnson's first year. And Georgia Tech went into the stadium, Sanford Stadium, raining. We were number 7 in the country or 6 in the country. Stafford's last home game, no Sean's last home game, and so on and so forth. And they ran us ragged in that triple option. I remember you called me an amateur barber. I was sitting in my barber's seat watching the game, and I was at this point committed to Georgia. And I was like, man, this looks ugly. You know what I mean? Like, this is not good. And sure enough, I think they won in like double overtime. They rushed for a ridiculous amount of yards and so on and so forth. And the next year, roles were reversed. Paul Johnson had his team humming, right? Nobody was really used to those types of athletes playing the triple option. They were 11 or 10-1. They've already clinched the ACC going to the title game. They were top 10 in the country. We, kind of stumbled in to Atlanta, Bobby Dodd game. We were 6-5, I believe. And we had lost, obviously, a lot of talent. Joe Cox was the quarterback. Aaron and Zach Mettenberger were both redshirting. Me and Orson were freshmen. I was barely playing. Orson was like playing a lot, but like probably playing too much for the responsibility that should have been put on his shoulders. Our running backs were solid players, but no one kind of stepped up for Noshawn in his absence. And for whatever reason, we went in there and everyone was saying that we were going to get our rear ends beat, right? That they were going to rush for 400 yards, night game, top 10. Georgia Tech was there to stay. And the year before, when they beat us in Sanford Stadium, they ripped the hedges out, right? And they put the hedges in their mouths and they say, stomp it on the hedges, stomp it on the G. And we remembered that, right? So me and my freshman class came in that summer, and not the Florida game, not the Auburn game. Everyone was talking about this Georgia Tech game. And sure enough, we gave them a dose of their own medicine, the kind of double-head monster of Washawn Ely and Caleb King, albeit brief. They came out and they rushed for I think it was 300-something yards. Noshawn went for $180. Their ongoing joke was that Noshawn didn't have the breakaway speed because he had two 40-yard runs, but got caught from behind, and Caleb had to punch it in. So Caleb had 3 touchdowns, and Noshawn had no touchdown, or Washawn had no touchdowns that game. But at the end of the game, we ended up winning. I think it was 30. Double check where I got here. It was 30-24, and awesome win. We ended up going 7-5. Just a great way to send out those seniors on the home turf. We got the Governor's Cup handed to us in the away locker room, celebrated Bobby Dodd Stadium. But there is an iconic picture that you already brought up, that Ben Jones, good old Bibb County, Alabama native, Ben Jones, ripped the gold part of the G in Georgia Tech out of the turf. Because this is, I think they still have grass now, but then they definitely had grass. Ripped it out, put it in his mouth, and just kind of gladiator-esque fist in the air. And that's kind of lasting. Yeah, that's a lasting image of that game. And obviously, the tide did not turn in the rivalry, right? Coach Rick still had a very good record against Paul Johnson as he did against the previous coach. And obviously Kirby has been absolutely dominant against this. But I think about that 2009 game, the last time that UGA and Georgia Tech have played a night game in that stadium. And I think it's a good example of that hatred between the two teams, right? The level of disrespect that they're okay sharing about one another. And really the meaning of the game to the seniors in particular. Man, do not sign out as a Georgia football player with a loss with an L to Georgia Tech, right? It'll haunt you forever. And so I think about it 2009. That was my first experience playing, and I didn't play much in the game. I did nothing, but I watched it, and I understood the visceral reaction that the team must have had the previous year after losing on their home turf or our home turf, and then that kind of like jubilant kind of just euphoric state that we were in, knocking off a top 10 team, you know, holding them to 100 yards rushing and rushing for 300 yards against like the greatest rushing attack ever. It's just really a special rivalry, right? So think the 2009 game, Caleb King with Sean Ely, Ben Jones. Shout out to you guys, and shout out to our defense, guys like Rashad Jones, Darius Dewberry, Daryl Gamble, DeMarcus Dobbs. Those guys stepped up and played their ass off to shut down a Georgia Tech team, which had guys like, Demaryius Thomas, right? Dudes in that team that could really play some football. And we were able to come out with a win, a big win. So that's the history class so far for you guys today. Keep it in the state, in the Peach State.
Keep it high and tight, baby. Good history class.
Yes,
I like it. It was a good segment, Artie. We appreciate it.
Of course.
So just recap. So I like Georgia 45-20. Artie likes what, 42-20? 40?
Go 42-20.
42-20. Yep. So Georgia Tech covers for Artie. Don't for me. We both like the over. Let's get into just a few games. We won't end it. It was a good show, guys. Games to watch here. So we got Oregon State at Oregon. Tough place to play. Everybody loves Oregon State, just like they did last week. I think Oregon wins comfortably. 16-point favorites, I believe. Artie likes that as well. Ohio State at Michigan, the game. Don't like the name, but under 45 is the play, folks. A lot of defense in this game, not a lot of offense. Two of the best defenses in the Big Ten, albeit we haven't seen them tested by anyone, and I don't think they get tested much in this game, but we like Ohio State. We talked about it yesterday on the CFP rankings show. If you haven't checked that out, me and already talked about how we do like Ohio State in this game, really simply for the fact because we believe in that offense a lot more than Michigan's. So Ohio State, watch that. Kentucky at Louisville. Tough game for Louisville. Didn't play their best last week. And then they got a Kentucky team coming in here to save their season because, man, Georgia broke them. Really looks like they did. So watch that game. It's a rivalry game as well. I know Louisville is going to play in the ACC championship. They're right there at number 10 still, I believe. So something to watch. Bama at Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Auburn lost to New Mexico State last week, which means this is going to be a 3-point game most likely. My Alabama alum friend, Bobcat, he's been on the show before, albeit a while ago. He thinks that Auburn plays on an Indian burial ground because of how weird it is to play there in the Iron Bowl. So kind of expect a close game there, but who knows? And Florida State at Florida. Interesting thing here, Artie. The loss of Jordan Travis. Vegas thinks that's huge for Florida State, just like everyone else, except really – I guess the Danny Cannell, a former Florida State Seminole, it's funny how the impact of where you went to school for these analysts is a big part, right? He's ACC through and through, but FSU is only 6.5-point favorites here, right? In Florida, they've shown. I mean, they're inconsistent as all get out. Almost beat Missouri though. Graham Mertz is playing his best ball of the season. Who knows? Florida may very well upset Florida State and really take all the questions out of the committee for having to have FSU up there without Jordan Travis. So those are the games to watch, and that was the show. We appreciate you guys for watching as always, whether you're watching on the Pulse Sports Network on YouTube or listening wherever you get your podcast. Really appreciate the support, and feel free to drop us some questions you want us to cover through the week. I'm at JC Shelton _ on Twitter, Arthur Lynch, A Lynch 1788. And of course, you can find us at UGA Football Live on Twitter, UGA Wire, USA Today Sports. Got some words there each week, and then editor for the Players Lounge, playerslounge.io. It's a great place to be if you want some exclusive content from your favorite players each week. Well, so that'll do it. So we like Georgia this week to roll, headed into a nasty matchup next week with number
clean old-fashioned hate, baby.
Alabama. We love it. All right, Artie, I appreciate you, man. Go Dogs. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Go Dogs. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.